All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the InstructLab CLI community meeting. Today is September 5th, 2024. We have some stuff on the agenda today regarding CI, some good first issues, and some design discussions I think that people have been talking about. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Nathan Weinberg and Ali to, get us started on some CI updates that they've been working on behind the scenes.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate the warm introduction. I just wanted to share with the forum some updates that myself and Ali, as well as a few others on the maintainer team, have been making to our upstream CI. A few things specifically I want to call out. The first is that the small t-shirt size end-to-end job we previously had running on every single PR, and we sort of determined that this was a bit excessive. I think I saw a README update PR that had an end-to-end job running, and I thought it's probably not necessary. So what we did, and I linked the implementation there if folks are curious, is we now have it only running against certain code paths. The code paths specifically are the same ones that Mergify was basically using, because Mergify only required the E2E job to be running when certain code paths were touched. So we just aligned those two things. We put some inline comments in there so that those two things are quickly helped in sync. So you should only be seeing that end-to-end job run on functional changes, as I've heard them referred to as. If anyone sees anything that's inconsistent or anything that maybe should be triggered but isn't being triggered, or vice versa, please do let me know. You can ping me on Slack, and I'll happy to take a look at that myself. One other thing I wanted to share is that the sort of large t-shirt size end-to-end job is now notifying results via Slack, where I had to do a quick follow-up due to a bug with the initial implementation, but I'm running a test right now, so hopefully we'll see some traction there. I've linked the Slack channel there if folks want to join and see results. I do want to give a quick disclaimer in that Ali and I are currently working to actually fix the large-scale end-to-end job. It's been broken for a while. This is part of the work around that. So it's probably going to be initially just failures for a while. So, feel free to mute the channel if it's annoying you. I'm going to make an announcement to the group when we've sort of fixed that up, and those results should be taken more seriously. But this is something that I believe the maintainer team should start paying attention to now that we're sort of out of the sort of crazy 17 to 18 cycle that we don't want to repeat. This should help us in catching regressions and ensuring stability through the rest of the development cycle from this point forward. So, and also, if you're curious, like when I say small and large t-shirt size jobs, what the hell I mean, I've linked the document there. We fixed this up as well. It's a pretty in-depth document on how the CI works, not just the end-to-end CI, but also the unit and functional tests, which we want to take some attention to as well. And this last thing that Charlie's just opened up here is an epic we've created for improvements to the end-to-end testing. So I think most of the issues in here are assigned, but if this is something you're interested in and you see an unassigned issue or something that's an issue with a linked PR that needs reviews, please take a look. And like I said, if you have any questions about any of this, we now have the recently reactivated CLI channel upstream for more sort of technical discussions around the CLI specifically. So you can feel free to add questions there as well. So that's my spiel. Oh, go ahead, Ollie, please.
I was going to say, just to give a little more context, what Nathan and I are going to look into, at least in the short run, is seeing how we can maximize two t-shirt sizes, like something smaller and something larger. And for the larger one, we're thinking of running like as beefed up of the workflow as possible with full SDG and a quicker phase train, but a phase train in there. But with a smaller t-shirt size, I think we're looking to see how many different code paths we can execute that don't take a long time. Like, for example, if there's like 2 or 3 different configuration related ways to initialize configuration, maybe we just exercise all those really quick on the smaller profile. Or if there's like multiple ways to download models, we just run all the types of downloads or something like that in the smaller one. So with the idea that the smaller one could be run either with every PR or very, very often, just to make sure that there's no regressions, but the longer one making sure that like the full system with like the bigger capabilities that we have is tested and exercised regularly. That's where we're going to start. I think by next week we'll have a really good idea of what's possible for both the hardware sizes. But that's kind of the direction we're trying to focus in right now. And if there's a need for a medium t-shirt size, then we'll add that, or we'll discuss that.
Yeah, the sort of minimal case we're running on PRs right now does a pretty good job of executing the sort of laptop use case.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I have a PR up and just to clean that up a bit, but that's pretty good. But yeah, to echo what Ali said, he's done some great work on getting, I think it's our A10 X4 job to run about a half hour and exercise a lot more code paths. So that would be something we'd probably also be running on PRs, either sort of one by one or in tandem or depending on conditionals. And then we may introduce even kind of like you said, we want to focus on those two sizes. We may even introduce a larger size, like sort of more of an enterprise size that would sort of take over the sort of periodic runs, and the one that's currently doing periodic runs we've moved to PR. So we have a lot of sort of planning around this, but we'll be sure to be transparent and share the details of what we're thinking with the group. And
yeah, there's a lot in flux right now in terms of what the different t-shirt sizes mean, because the reason they existed initially is because we had so many different implementations for things like CPU training versus full rank GPU training and stuff like that. So alongside actually fixing up the tests, at least I'm working on this release, is trying to unify the actual workflow of like SCG and training on laptops, as well as if you have A100s, which I know none of us have. So trying to at least make it work for everyone on their laptops is something that I'm really investing a lot of time in this release. So you might see some changes between 18 and 19 with how training specifically looks as compared to what's going on currently on the Mac OS side and the Linux CPU side. So just a heads up about that. Yeah. Any other comments, questions, concerns about this testing stuff? Nope. Cool. So we have this. I don't know who added this. Going over the good first issues. I think this is probably a good idea to do.
I added it.
Do we want to go over all of them?
Probably not. Maybe just the unassigned ones.
That's a good
That'd
idea.
Be a good thing to add to the filter.
And the ones maybe without PRs too would be probably a thing to look at. So
yeah, I also want to make sure we have enough time to go over Jaydeep's design discussion.
Yeah,
maybe that's what he's raising his hand for.
No. It's for this topic. I think this is good. I want to say, do we want to assign them all in this call, because I'm part of mentorship.
I don't think
that I'm doing for like
Mhm.
University students who are like trying to ramp up on Instruct-Lab. So I think it would be good to just like leave this open for like them as well. Like this is like more for like.
I mean, I don't think we could assign them all to this call.
Yeah, right.
Unless people are volunteering.
No.
It'd be good if those people could come to this call, because then they could hear about them and
yeah, that's true.
get assigned to it. I mean, I would say that if you like, I would encourage you to encourage them to come to this meeting.
I take your encouragement. Consider
I
me.
encourage that. I appreciate your encouragement.
So do we want to go through these?
I think the unassigned ones without PRs, it's worth taking a quick look at. But like I said, I want to make sure we have enough time for Jaydeep's design discussion as well.
Sure. I can give a quick spiel about what I think these are all about. So this one's a little weird. We added a bunch of defaults that pertain to the persistent storage implementation in 18. So if you see things being stored in actual regular parts of your file system, not in your working directory, there's this defaults thing in the configuration.py file, I think it is. They kind of blend in with a lot of other stuff, which I think is the point of this issue. So just basically lifting those and out of the configuration.py file and putting them into their own place to live and maintain is probably a good move. This is a pretty easy one because it's primarily a code lift and shift. It would require changing some, some references, I would say, to these defaults. But overall, this is just a code move. Yeah. Any questions on this one?
I think Sebastian was the one who moved all of them into configuration. To be honest, I kind of like that. To be able to have like we define where like the config classes are as well as the descriptions and defaults. Like that seems pretty intuitive to me. I haven't looked into the circular dependency issue itself. So I don't want to comment on whether this is like something we should or shouldn't do, but I think in general, like I like the existing way of doing things, but maybe there is, if we can find another way. Is this an existing issue? Because it's not breaking our compilation or anything, right? Or is this just
No,
potential?
the circular dependency thing, I think, isn't really accurate. I think it's more like it's kind of confusing to because we've been adding a lot of configuration code recently to configuration.py. I see what you're saying. How having them there as well is probably a convenience, but a convenience isn't always like the cleanest way to represent things. So I think what this is saying is having that whole chunk of defaults that exists at the top of the file in its own file would be the clearest way to have people understand what those are as compared to the configuration code. I don't think the circular dependency thing is, I haven't seen that, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah, so
This
it's
is just more of a cleanup.
Yeah, design choice, whether put it in the class or put it in its own file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what this one is. Anyone can feel free to assign themselves to this if they want to. We can go over a few more. Oh, this is a pretty important one. Provide an easy way to disable LoRa. This isn't really going to pertain to people who aren't training on laptops, or I mean, who are training on laptops, because you always want LoRa on, just so it fits on your laptop. But if you ever want to turn LoRa off, the way to do that currently is to set LoRa rank to 0, and then every other LoRa field is ignored. It's kind of a clunky way of doing things. But so having some sort of LoRa enabled, flag for false or true would be kind of a move in the right direction. Costa, if you want to add that to the agenda, the question you just put in the chat, feel free. But I don't think we're going to be taking suggestions for the agenda from the meeting chat. So just feel free to add it to the doc if you'd like. Yeah, so this one's pretty straightforward as well. It's just adding a toggle on off for LoRa. It's a good way to get familiar with our LoRa code, stuff like that. I'm going to pick and choose here. This documentation one is also a great first issue, because we currently, a lot of the information on how to debug Instruct-Lab and get it working in specific situations is kind of like tribal knowledge. And you have to go into the upstream Slack and ask us how to get it working in specific scenarios. So the development of some sort of centralized, like, hey, did you have this issue sort of doc for debugging purposes would be pretty helpful. I think maybe the maintainer team would be the good first place to start this. But if folks want to get that going instead and just put it in the upstream repo, that would be great. I think that's what this one is all about. Yeah. I can go over probably one more, and then we should probably switch to JDeep's topic just so we have time for that. Choose one that makes the most sense. Oh, this would be a good one. So a lot of our model dependencies, like some people might be familiar with the model family flag that we have. The chat templates, we only currently support the Granite family and the Mixtral family of chat templates just because we have them locally. But Hugging Face usually provides chat templates with the models that you can download. So we don't currently download those when we download a model. I'm sure it's just another couple of lines of code to grab that chat template and then use it in the chat process. So this would be a pretty great first issue for someone to take on and get familiar with both the download code and the chat code. So anyone can feel free to take this one on. But yes, everyone can find all of these just by searching in our issues with the label of good first issue. You can also just do it like this as well. So if you want to sort these and look through them and assign yourself some of them, or comment and ask the maintainer team if they have any recommendations, feel free to reach out to us in the upstream CLI Slack channel. Cool. All right, so I think can go now to JD's two things here. One of them's a poll, one of them's an issue. I'm going to open the pull request first, JD.
Yeah. This is just a quick information thing to let people know that we know that the Mac OS application support thing has been a pain for a while. So we have a PR now. Hopefully, if we can get this reviewed and merged, that should fix that issue. It will be a breaking change for Mac users. So we probably need to find the best way to document that. But regardless, we want to do this, and this is also like the first of probably a series of Mac cleanup PRs that I'm hoping to work on. This along with working with Charlie for the MPS enablement. I think there's some good work we can do in kind of restructuring that and making it a bit more intuitive. I know that there's also some issues around iLab model convert not working out of the box. You have to specify some flags and stuff, like things that broke over the course of the development of 18. So get those fixes in and kind of get the Mac workflow to where it was in previous releases. So just letting people know that that's on our radar, and we are planning to address that. That was it. Yeah. So for this one, this is the kind of a design discussion that I think we thought would be good to have here. So to kind of give an overview of this is currently, if you worked with the CLI, you might have seen that we have a bunch of model related flags and different subcommands that all kind of look like they do the same thing, which they kind of do, but it's slightly different purposes. And there's a lot of nuances around, sometimes it's a path, sometimes it's a name, sometimes it's a local path, sometimes it can pull from Hugging Face. So it's a little bit muddled up, and this is kind of part of an effort to clean that up. So the idea is to consolidate around one flag for models and have that flag kind of accept multiple types of inputs. So either paths or repo names. And if it's path, it should accept absolute paths as well as relative paths. And so this kind of issue outlines a proposed solution for how to do this in the most consistent sort of way. So the main thing to think about it is that there are two aspects of this. So there's the flag, which is like a -- model or a -- model path, whatever it is. We need to agree and unify on what that flag is called, that one flag, as well as the second part is the value that goes into the flag. And that also kind of needs to be standardized a little bit. These are two related issues for the overall UX improvement of working with this part of the code. But these two, it must be said that these two parts are they have their own separate things that need to be done to handle them. So right now I'm only talking about the first part, which is the flag. So to consolidate and all of the flags into one flag and decide how that flag should behave, what kind of inputs it should accept. So this issue kind of proposes a hierarchical approach towards the model flag or model path, whatever we end up calling it. It should be that we assume that whatever is passed into this flag is first an absolute path. So we first look for it against the root in the file system, and we see that whether this path actually exists. If we find it, then okay, that means that the user actually passed an absolute path. And then once we find it, then we have additional checks that we run to see whether what we found is actually a model. So there are checks to see whether the folder that we found is a safe tensor model, or if it's a file that's a gguf model. So we have that. If we don't find anything, then we assume that we move to the next check, which is we assume it's possibly a relative path. And for this to work, we assume that it would be a relative path to where like the models are all stored in like the system directory, which is like cache model, like cache Instruct-Lab models. And then we assume whatever they pass in there is relative to that subdirectory. And then we do the same thing there. If we don't find it there either, then we have an option of either, okay, so we know that the model doesn't exist on the user's machine, so maybe we should download it for them from Hugging Face, or we can just error out and say that, hey, you don't have this model downloaded. Why don't you go explicitly download it through iLab model download, and then you get it. So that's kind of the proposed way of how we think that the first, like the model flag itself should be kind of reworked so that we have one flag that behaves in the same consistent way across all the subcommands that we have. And that I think will help reduce a lot of the confusion, because if you see that the linked issue, there's a bunch of other issues that are all kind of linked to it. So this kind of issue has cropped up in many different places, and it's a pain point for users. So the first part of this talks about, how like a proposed way to unify around the one flag that we want to use. The second part of it is we also want to standardize what value goes into this flag. So like what users actually send into this model flag. So that's kind of the second part of this issue, is that I kind of have an open PR for this, but I think this is more of a pitch that I kind of want to make for how this should work. So currently today, if you do like an iLab model download, we support two different ways of downloading, either through Hugging Face or we support through OCI downloads. And in both cases, we kind of haven't properly standardized the output directory format that is created when a model is downloaded. So for now, it's like if you download from Hugging Face, it's just like the repo name / the model name, versus like if it's OCI, then it gets downloaded to an OCI folder, and then we symlink it in a slightly different format. So the second part of this basically talks about introducing a standard format for how models are stored once they're downloaded. So if you usually you're downloading it through like a URL because the model is hosted somewhere else, like quay.io, something, or even Hugging Face. Like there's an actual URL that you can use. So the second part of this was like I have a existing PR to replicate that URL structure in our local cache, so that the URL becomes a relative path to where the model is stored in the system directory. So if you have a model that says quay.io Granite 7B lab, then like that exact path will be available in your local cache. And like you can basically reference the model using that one string, and we'll basically look for it first in your local cache. And then if we don't find it, then we have that exact URL which we can use to download the model. So like that's the idea around that. And if we were to follow that, then we could basically we would be asking the users to always use that entire URL as their way to represent the model that they want to use, because that allows us to A, use the URL as a relative path, B, it allows us to establish uniqueness for models. If you have the entire path, you can be sure that you're using the model that was downloaded from Quay, because you can have the same model being hosted in Quay or Hugging Face or like many different places, and you might want to maintain a version of those locally. So you want to be able to have a way to tell the difference between, hey, this Granite model was downloaded from Quay and this one was downloaded from Hugging Face. And if we were to store that entire URL, we'd have a way to uniquely identify where this model was downloaded from. And in addition to that, we can also extend that to manage versions. So you can have a quay.io Granite 7B Lab 1.1, 1.2. So like this kind of structure allows us to also maintain versions. So we can work with multiple versions of the model at the same time, which I think will be a use case that will come up eventually. So the second part of this is to standardize that, okay, if we agree that users will always supply models in this URL sort of directory format, then that in combination with us having consolidated around one flag, I think the combination of these two things will ensure that we have a consistent flag that always behaves the same and a consistent input format to that flag, which will also like work throughout the process. So like this combination is like a big UX change, but I think it's a good step towards standardizing the experience for everyone, and kind of handling a lot of the edge cases and unexpected behavior that we kind of see with how we have things set up now. So that's kind of the design highlight of the design change. I'm probably going to be working with Alina to raise a dev doc for this, because I can go into more detail of like how the models will be stored in this new format. I have some ideas around creating a metadata file, like a hidden file that we create that has like version information, which commit, which branch was used, all of that kind of stuff. And then, that will also have to feed into like the output for ILab model list, which can be enhanced to have version information in there and which commit each model represents. So like all of that kind of stuff, I'm going to probably work with Alina to put in a big dev doc, which covers both aspects, how we consolidate around a model flag and like what the standardized input, the like reference of models would look like. But that's kind of the gist of it. I hope that kind of made sense to some extent.
One thing I wanted to raise is that with the multiple versions of the same model, the best way to probably handle that in terms of listing is to have like a versions field of the list that's like, we have these versions. So like listing them, each version as a separate thing is probably not the right move, but listing like, hey, we have this model and these versions of the model in like the same column, the same row, would probably make the most sense. Just so there's like, because I know if certain models get released a lot, and every time you download one, it adds another row to your model list, that'll get pretty bulky. But yeah, having some sort of like actual version management system is definitely something that we have to have, because I think currently we just overwrite models when you download the new version, especially definitely from Hugging Face. I'm not sure about Quay.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. I can make sure to include that in the dev doc. But as for like the overall idea of this design improvement, do people have thoughts? I know that Nathan raised a good point about usability. Like if you were to enforce that users always use the whole sort of URL path to reference a model, it's very verbose and might be annoying for users to use. And I think that's a valid point, but I don't given the other considerations around maintaining uniqueness and traceability of models, I don't know that there's a better way to do that. But I'm wondering what people think about that.
Well, one thing that I know something like Podman does, I think, I'm just thinking if this is kind of like images, is that you can specify something like quit.io / blah, 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 blah. But I'm pretty sure you can also just specify like the name. So if like you're running a container with Alpine, for example, you don't have to put the entire URL to run a container with Alpine. You can just run like Podman run Alpine. So we might want to have a way to have like a best guess sort of thing. If we get it wrong, whatever. If you have multiple models that are Granite 7B Lab version 1.1, that's kind of like your problem to deal with. But if you want to be able to just specify Granite 7B Lab 1.1, then we'll choose probably the first one we find that matches that in the cache. Just so there is a way to not have to specify like a path. I think that would be nice. But I think also if you can specify the like quit.io / AI lab / models / Granite 7B Lab / version 1.1. That should also be accepted. So that's just one thing that I would maybe tack on as some sort of shorthand system that we just say like, we're going to choose this model. If you specify just the name, we're going to do the first one we find. That could be kind of helpful for usability. I don't know though, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I hear that. I know that's a good point about how Docker does it, or like how Podman does it. But if that we just have to weigh out whether the convenience of not having to specify that is worth the ambiguity of like what we pick behind the scenes, because users don't have kind of visibility into that. But like the option that they have where like they can specify the whole thing and get what they want, as long as we're supporting that, maybe it's good enough to do that. So I don't have super strong opinions.
Yeah, like if you have multiple Granite models, like and you're not specifying the full path, you like it's kind of your fault if you get one that you don't, it's not the right one. Like if you for some reason in your InstructLab models directory have like 7 Granite 7B labs, but all you specify when you run anything with -- model flag as Granite 7B Lab, we will choose probably the newest one, I would say is a sane thing to do. And maybe we can log that we're auto detecting which model is the right model. But having some way to just do that for most people, because most people are going to be like, why is it saying that this model doesn't exist when it does exist when they do model list and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just the one thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so that the aligning it with the Podman convention can be like an enhancement that we make on top of this, and I'm fine with that. I just want to see if people are okay with the new proposed way of storing models in that sort of URL-based directory structure, and then like kind of agreeing that we want this uniformity that all models look like that. And like, yeah, we'll add some UX sugar on top where we kind of best guess it, so you don't have to put the whole URL, but like the underlying kind of standardization would involve it looking like that, and like its combination with the consolidation of the flag itself. As long as we all agree that like we want to pursue this, I think that's kind of the main thing I'm hoping for.
Costa, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to propose to consider to use symbolic links to manage different structures of models sorted accordingly, provider sorting accordingly, type of model or family. What do you think?
So we already use symlinks in some sense. Like for example, we use it today. When you download a model from OCI registries, it gets downloaded in a very different format. It's a bunch of different blobs for different layers that have like different SHA names. So, and there's a whole kind of logic that goes into matching the correct blob with the correct file. And so we make symlinks. So we actually download it in a folder called OCI that has the actual blobs, but we symlink the files into like the models directory. So it looks like your model lives there, but the actual files live somewhere else. So we use symlinks in that sense, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant. You meant to use symlinks in a different way.
I mean to use symbolic links like index table for another table, like indexing accordingly, names, provider, type.
Okay. I guess we haven't really looked into that. If you have, if you are able to write up an issue with your idea, we could probably look into it with a bit more detail. That would be awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no other comments on this, I for one agree with this. Like I think I made the original issue that was like we need to standardize somehow because we get a lot of issues where people are like, oh, what's model versus model path, and sometimes model takes a path and model path is a model name. There's just been a lot of iteration on all of these commands in the last couple of months where I think it's gotten a bit confusing as to what does what. So this is definitely the right step, I think, to take in terms of standardization. Yeah, thanks, Judy.
Yeah.
Can I add one last thing to this discussion? Based on what you just said, Charlie, which is once we make like a decision on how this is going to be implemented forward, like how do we prevent further implementations that then go against this design? Because I think part of the problem that got us to the point where we need to do this heavy of a lift is the fact that we sort of had an implementation, and that implementation was then kind of like replicated in different ways and became inconsistent. So like, and I'm not saying we have to figure this out in this call, because this is, I realize, a larger sort of question, but like we need to have a way to make sure that when we agree upon these kind of design decisions, that they're not just followed in the moment, but that then they're followed subsequently.
Yes, the age-old question: how do we prevent bugs going forward?
No,
I mean,
that's not what this is.
I know it's a little more intense than that, but I think it's kind of it's going to be on us to when we review PRs. I think if we socialize the dev doc enough, when the decision is made, because it's not every day that a model flag is added. It's mostly when a new command is introduced at this point.
It feels like it.
Yeah, but it's really just with new commands. And if a new command is being introduced, I think with a flag for a model, I think the reviewers will remember, hopefully, this situation. That's why like socializing it like this is a good idea. But other than that, there's only so much we can do.
I think it'd be good to revisit this once a decision has been made, just so we can socialize it in this meeting. And we should probably also be sharing it in the upstream Slack channels, maybe even a mailing list if we're feeling ambitious.
I mean, would it like have some kind of UX principles document or something where we clearly state like commands that take models should use -- model for
The thought
like,
was to move this to the dev doc so we can have that as the source of truth and we can just point to that. Like if someone tries to introduce like a design that goes against it.
Yeah, that is a good point though, as to what Ali's saying, that like we could, in our like PR template, if we have a general like UX doc, that's like make sure you're following the UX conventions of introducing a new command or modifying commands. That could be a good move, because that's a pretty common thing that open source projects do, where it's like make sure you follow the UX conventions. That might be a better idea than introducing like a dev doc just for this flag. It might be like a UX dev doc in general to introduce, which would be a big thing. But this could be the start of it, at least.
I'm also thinking like people are just going to forget about this, and even as a maintainer or a reviewer, it would be nice to say, okay, somebody added a new command. Are they violating any of the principles that would make this command inconsistent compared to the rest of the commands or something like that?
I think the UX template or doc or whatever should either live in dev docs or just point to a bunch of dev docs, because I think we really need to be encouraging the use of dev docs as a source of truth. And right now, people might not always look at it. So yeah.
It's also a bigger conversation we have to have about what warrants a dev doc, because it used to be like, oh, if you were making changes to multiple repos, but now it's kind of, we've gotten to the point where that doesn't really make sense anymore, because major changes can happen inside of an individual part of the Instruct-Lab workflow, like the CLI or any of the libraries. So yeah, I think either a dev doc for this that we then link to in our PR template, or a general UX dev doc, which might be better, because that means we only have to link it once in the PR template, and then anytime anyone adds anything to it, it's automatically picked up because it's just already in the PR template. Might make the most sense rather than having multiple dev docs. But I think whoever ends up doing this, which I think is going to be JD or Alina or both, I think it's up to you guys, whichever you want to do. I think it might make sense to do the UX one, but yeah, whatever you do, it's better than nothing. Cool. Kelly?
Kind of just going off of that, I think maybe I agree that the dev docs are the way to go. And I think maybe if there's like a consolidated version where it's literally just like the biggest points, and it, like what you said, Charlie, you just link it in the PR template. So it's literally just one consolidated version of almost every dev doc. I don't think that that's like a super hard thing to do. I can take that on. But I think I agree that a consolidated version of like a developer guideline would be good.
Yeah, and I know James is working on something like this. I don't know if it's going to be dev docified, which it probably should be. So there can be some duplication of work here, which is fine, because the more guidelines, the better. But, yeah.
Yeah, agreed, Kelly. I think what I was suggesting when I said like link to a bunch of dev docs is the UX doc itself. Like it can have probably a bunch of summaries in it, or a bunch of like the main principles, main guidelines, and then it'll link to the full expanded thing.
Yeah, but it the only thing is like, then that's another thing for people to remember when they're adding UX stuff, to add it to a centralized place. I'm just trying to think, like, as people make these decisions going forward, what's the least amount of steps they have to take to make sure that their changes are represented in an overall UX place. We can hash this out in Slack, but something is better than what we currently have, which is nothing. So I think, yeah, I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, it's also not every dev doc is a UX thing. So there's that part too, where it just might be a different thing we have to do. But I think we can hash this out.
I think in this case, I don't see why we can't have both. A general UX doc applies to more than just one issue or one epic that we're proposing. But also, I guess, in the case of what we discussed earlier with the model flags, because it's more than just about the flags, it's also about like how we kind of centralize around how models are stored and referenced. Like, I think it's a combination of two separate but related issues. So like together, I think they make a big enough case to have their own sort of dev doc to agree on this particular flow. So in my opinion, we can probably have both, like a general UX thing, which will apply to more than just this particular issue, and then one dedicated to this one. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's probably the best solution, or else the central dev doc will just be huge. So I don't really. I mean, again, I don't really care. I was just kind of stating that anything that we do is better than none of them. So as long as we link it to some sort of PR template, I think we're good to go once the doc exists.
Yeah, we got 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we have time for Costa's topic. So
Yep. Yeah, I say we move on to that one.
Thanks all.
Yep. All right, Costa. So what are the key directions and stages of InstructLab's development over the upcoming months? Did you have anything you wanted to add before we attempt to give an answer to this, or not?
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said there.
So the question is complete. I would glad to know what the direction of development, what is going to be added. For example, as I saw the last months, there was a lot of changes in configuration, for example. And I would like to know what is going to be in further months.
Yeah. So whoever just linked that milestone link, you read my mind. That's what I was going to say. We have these milestones that are basically maintained for the next 2 or 3 releases. I know we've done a lot of triaging for 19, which is going to be the next release. And then we've already started moving things to 20, which is the release after that. So that's the best thing to look at in terms of what we're going to be working on. Asking for a comprehensive, like these are our priorities. We're still in kind of a transitionary phase in between, adding a lot of hardware acceleration and maintaining a laptop use case. I would say, at least from what I'm going to be working on, and I know a bunch of others are going to be working on, is stability in terms of, fixing up the laptop use case and making sure that the workflow is as aligned as possible with the more hardware accelerated use case. We want to make sure that from top to bottom, people are running the same commands, see similar output, and basically just get a lower fidelity or a higher fidelity output, or that takes longer or takes shorter, depending on what you're running on. So that's like our main priority, is kind of cleaning things up and making sure everything works properly for everyone. Beyond that, the milestones are the best place to go to look for specifics, as in terms of like epics that we've started creating, or larger issues and features and enhancements and stuff like that. I see there's a couple of hands. I think BJ was first, and then Ali.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel the same way that I think that Costa does. That in many ways, the project is basically reactionary. It's not looking forward. And milestones are fine for tracking things and immediate work stuff, but they don't look very far out in the future. So I think the part of the question is, what's the vision for this project in a year? What is it, what do the project's technical leadership team want to see out of the project, right? This is driven by a bunch of stakeholders, hopefully, but it's not clear, where, as a contributor, where should I put my energy, rather than just sort of fixing bugs as they're written, but what's the next big thing, or next 2 big things that we want to add to this? And I'm not saying we have to solve it in this call, but I think that I see it sort of a lack of leadership, project technical leadership here, that should be driving the vision. Now that we've gotten 18 done, it's time to figure out what it looks like in a year from now, at least in broad strokes, to give people direction.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. Again, I think saying that 18 is going, like the way that we handle that is going to be the norm is not true. I think that was an exception, right? So the releases going forward are going to be a lot more organized, feature focused, bug focused, and we're going to be very clear with what's in the milestone and what our priorities are. I don't think I or anyone on the call can answer for you what the year-long vision is. I think the hope is internally we're going to be having a lot of meetings to discuss both downstream and upstream what the project's priorities are in the next couple of weeks. I know that is something that is going to happen. But yeah, I think that in terms of the dev team, who is here right now, we kind of just we refine these milestones. We look at what we think is important in terms of what we know doesn't work, what we know needs to work in a 1 to 2 month, looking forward sort of ideology. But beyond that, I think that's kind of all I can offer you at this moment. But we're definitely going to have some sort of planning meetings going forward, and I'm sure we'll have some updates that are more specific than what I can provide. But I see Ali has a hand up, and as does Nathan.
Yeah, quickly responding to BJ, I think some context that might be missing is that at least for the 19 release, we're really just since there's so much work done between 17 and 18, we're really focused on stability and cleaning up the UX and bug fixes, and maybe starting to really change up how we're doing the configuration management and the profile stuff. But what I originally raised my hand for was maybe it's one of those things where, like, as a community, we need to get in the habit of the next community meeting after a release is cut or something like that, that we have each of the big group areas like the CLI, the training, and the SDG, and evaluation, and anything else, just present what's on the roadmap for that next release, and what we're thinking and where we need help. And maybe we even start by doing that some next week, just so that we can start getting in the habit and we don't leave any other contributors in the dark, and we can think where there might be places to offer help.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think something like that is definitely necessary. I do think that what I said, though, in terms of internally, we have to do some planning and some alignment in terms of what team's working on what and who's doing what on what team needs to happen first before we can commit to saying something like that, Ali. I think all of this will be resolved after 19, just because 18 was such a long haul, and it was painful for us and for the community to produce 18, just because there was a lot of expectations and things that we had to work on that were outside of the community. I think it's realistic to expect that by 20 we'll have these sort of expectations outlined, or at least more clear and able to give you a better answer than we're working on it, which is kind of all we can provide for sure right now. So I wouldn't promise anything besides we're trying to figure it out. And for 19, as Ali said, it's stability. But beyond that, I think the milestones are the best place to look, and we're going to try to get back to the community with answers for things like larger priorities and long-term goals within the next month or so. So I think that's all we can really provide right now without making empty promises. Nathan?
Yeah, kind of in lieu of that, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I mean, as a CLI maintainer, frankly, I'm not entirely sure how empowered the maintainer team is for making the kind of directional decisions that Costa and BJ are describing here. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there are 3 things that really drive this project. And that is, there's the oversight committee on the community side of things, which is the group of people that's actually in charge of the project. There's the IBM research side of things. This project was born out of IBM research. And there's the Red Hat side, which is sort of product driven, and the downstream RelAI. So I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I agree that these are questions that need to be answered, but I'd have to ask for those that are looking for these answers. Has there been any due diligence done to sort of reach out to these parties? I mean, maybe this is news to folks, and I also could be incorrect in my assumption that these are sort of the 3 main parties that are actually in charge of the governance. But I mean, as someone who is not a member of any of the sort of leadership side from any of these groups, I can't say, kind of echoing what Ollie and Charlie have hinted at, like I can't say simply as a CLI maintainer and then, you know, in a more grounded sense, a Red Hat engineer, how empowered we are to make those kind of decisions, at least in this form.
Yeah, we've kind of been in these conversations before, where the best answer we have to provide to you is we're not the right people to ask these questions to. And there is I think it's a public list of who's on the oversight committee, definitely. I think the folks on that list would be the right people to privately broach these conversations to, or schedule a meeting with them, or something like that. We can probably ask them, or folks in the community can ask those people on that, the various powers that be to come to these community meetings, so these questions can be asked directly. But yeah, we're kind of the technical team that does the things that we deem necessary to get the thing working and to features that we think would benefit the community. But beyond that, in terms of larger scope planning, it's not in our jurisdiction. But I do echo what I said earlier. I know that there are conversations to be had as to what's going to be worked on when, in the coming weeks, at least for the downstream product, which I'm sure will shape things that have to happen for the upstream project. And yeah, I know that the Instruct-Lab team at Red Hat is looking to be more upstream focused now that we've had the I think it was BJ who said the painful pregnancy of 0.18. Now that that's over, I know that a lot of us want to focus on upstream going forward and for permanently. So that's kind of the best we can provide you. I know you were probably hoping for like a timeline or a roadmap, but I don't think we can provide that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't looking for you guys to answer the question. I think it's several people are feeling it, right? I'm sort of trying to figure out what am I going to do in this project in the future, and I don't know other than sitting around waiting for bugs to come in. So and again, you guys are the frontline soldiers, but you report to officers, and so we need for this project. I think most healthy open source projects have a technical steering committee, a technical leadership team that helps adjudicate technical issues, helps understand where the project should be going, and helps drive technical operations, right? So I don't know who those people are. I mean, I'm not saying it's you or Nathan or anyone else, but somebody is, right? So maybe I need to go to Mo and rattle her cage and see if she can figure out who these people are so that we can get something going. That's all. So again, I'm not blaming anybody on this call for anything. You guys are working hard, doing great work. It's just that somebody else at a level up needs to help us understand what this thing looks like 6 months from now, a year from now.
I agree 100%, PJ. I think to your point, a technical steering committee, I think we need something in the upstream governance beyond the oversight committee. Like, yeah, what you just echoed there. And I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, like I agree. This is something that is missing. And I think now that we're past 18, I think that is something that we need to get our bosses to get off the ground here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I do think that one thing I will say is the dust is definitely still settling from 18. Like a lot of these conversations, like the model path one we had today is we need to fix this after we broke something probably in 18 because we introduced so many things. So I would really let the dust settle a little bit more and let us fix some stuff. And then already we're starting to plan out some really larger scale work in terms of epics that are upstream. That previously, like, we didn't have anything that large scale. It was just implement this, get this working, fix that bug, fix that. So we're already starting to do longer term work in terms of planning multiple sprints, multiple releases down the line, which we previously weren't. We were just doing things that needed to be done to get 18 out the door. So I think naturally a couple of months in advance planning will start to appear from us. But in terms of larger priorities, yeah, everything you said is true. Everything Nathan said is true. We got to figure out who's in charge of that. And I think there does need to be some sort of amendment to the upstream governance to add some sort of more technical, hands-on people to steer these sort of priorities. that was a great conversation. And I think it's definitely something that I know that we're wondering about, and we'll try to follow up best as we can. Any other questions or comments for this topic or for anything? If anyone wants to do some open discussion, feel free. But we're pretty much at time. So what I would say is
I will just add one thing I'd like to say before we close off, which is that outside of the sort of CLI maintainer team that's Red Hat based, I do want to call out that, like, for our other Red Hat folks at IBM, the contributions are definitely not unnoticed, and they're very appreciated. And I know that, like, sort of the chain of command, if you will, is a little fragmented between the companies at the upstream, and it can be frustrating at times. But I'll say this, just personally, like from an engineering side of things, that the contributions that we've gotten from folks, and the help we've gotten with PR reviews and et cetera is very much appreciated. I don't want to discount that by any means. And I hope that kind of collaboration is something that will be sticking around in the future.
plus one to that, Nathan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now because we're at time, but feel free to add anything to the agenda for next week.
Thanks all. See you.